Welcome back to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I am joined by JP Mason for the Thursday Bulletin. JP, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, man, good. Glad to be here to talk about 3 points last night and not a 0-0 draw, as it was looking a bit like it was going to be at half-time. But I don't think we played badly. We just we got there in the end, and it took me a while to warm up when I got home last night on a freezing cold night at Celtic Park on a Wednesday night. It was a I wouldn't say it was a hard watch or a hard game, because I don't think we did play terribly, but it's just, I think everybody's just wanting us to get back into some sort of form at the moment, and maybe that's the beginning of it last night. I hope so.
I hope so. I mean, when I'm watching the game, I try to do it from the kind of angle, JP, that if something's not quite going right, you're trying to look for solutions. You're looking at what can we do differently? How can we combat a certain style of play that we have seen quite a few times this season, and undoubtedly we'll see again over the next 9 games. I've put that up. It's 9 in a row, basically focusing on that small target in 9 games, negotiate our way through those 9 games, and we win the league. It's in our hands. We're in control of our own destinies here. So I was watching the game against Hibs at the weekend, and it was really frustrating to watch, because we've seen that before. We've been in that movie before. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in the comments, I think it was our third scoreless draw in the league this season. St Mirren and Livy being the other 2. And the 3 games were quite similar, not just with the scorelines, but in the manner in which the game played out. It got to a point where you're thinking, right, unless we really change it or mix it up here, we're not going to get the breakthrough. And people start saying we could have played all day without a goal. You kind of get that sense on afternoons like that. And I'm looking at last night's game, and I'm going to ask you, because you were there bearing the cold on a Wednesday night, did you get that vibe at any point where you're thinking, oh no, we're going to drop something here?
The more the first half went on, I did. Yeah, the more the first half went on, I was thinking, we're not quite at it here. There was a lot of players, again, not playing really at the top end of their potential. Everybody went daft about Hatate when he came in. And I know he's played a season already, as is Maeda. And this is probably a weird, situation whereby he's not really experienced this before, where he's gone straight into another season playing at quite an intense level as well. But everyone went daft about Hatate after Tynecastle. I came on here and went, yeah, he was good, but I was trying to sort of temper that, enthusiasm, and then I got shot down in comments for saying, oh, come on, he's great, there's going to be a new 25, 30 million pound, asset, and you're just like, okay. And then obviously it does what he does against Rangers. And by the same token, I'm not going to then slate him for last night, because you know what the guy's got in his locker. Last night wasn't one of his better games, and didn't really provide that dynamism in the midfield that we've seen from him. The zip, as Hugh Keevins has called it. One of the few things he's called things right this season. I think last night as well, Jota didn't really sort of get going. Abada as well. I thought Abada was coming on to game before he got subbed off. And I think there were a few people kind of around about us going, why is he taking him off? He's having a bit of joy. But then Forrest came on and did well, as did all the subs. You spoke about it in the aftermatch last night, that the subs made a huge difference. Rogic was in that mood where he didn't want to get beat. He had that kind of like, nah, I'm winning this duel, I'm winning this tackle, I'm beating you, and I'm beating you again. And was spraying balls and started to make St Mirren look tired. With one guy on the ball started to make St Mirren look tired, and maybe that is what happened after a lot of efforts in the first half. But certainly from our point of view, you're just thinking back to the game at St Mirren Park. I'm going to call it St Mirren Park because I have no idea what it's called. No disrespect to St Mirren, but
just call it Love Street, mate.
I think is it Global Energy or Indo Drill? I can't remember who sponsors it. I mean, Love Street is what it is in my head when I think about it. I know it's a completely different ground, but you think back to that night, and they were able to get a 0-0 that night, and you're thinking, well, are they able to get a 0-0 tonight? And then thankfully, from a set piece. Both centre halves combine. The much maligned centre halves, I might add as well. I mean, Starfelt even last night. If you asked somebody last night after the game if they thought Starfelt played well and they said no, then I would then have to probably take them for a lie detector test to be like, come on now, this is getting beyond ridiculous. Starfelt played well last night. Cameron Carter-Vickers was the man of the match. Guy next to me said it 5 minutes before it was announced. It was like, oh, he's my man of the match, and he was mine as well. You know, he was immense. Like, it just didn't look like anything bothered him. That week on the pace, I think you mentioned it last night, where he can beat a man, you know, and just bring it out at defence and just sort of ghost by people when you're like, how is he doing that? So it also led me to say to the guy next to me, I said, look, see if you had £6 million and you were forced to buy Jota or Cameron Carter-Vickers.
That's a good debate.
I would take Cameron Carter-Vickers, and I'm not saying this just because Jota's had a couple of so-so games. I'm just thinking about it purely from the angle that how hard are centre halves to get. You know, and I know you could then say, well, how hard is a left-sided winger to get, and that's an argument in itself. But I think for the solidity of the team, Carter-Vickers has barely put a foot wrong all season. He's been consistently good all season, so it would be a warped argument if you were. But I'd like to hear the argument the other way. Put it that way.
Well, I hope that debate is never had. I hope you know, but it's a very good question, by the way, JP, and I want to talk about both of those players and a few of the others that you mentioned. And, you know, this is a thing I think you learn through time, having done quite a lot of the games, the post-matches, JP, that you're looking for specific reasons why maybe Jota's off the boil, maybe why Hatate hasn't been as good in the last few games. Then you look at the form of Rogic. Yeah, he was good when he came on last night, but he's kind of gone off. Yeah. And then you start thinking, well, Jota's still coming back from an injury layoff where he had to go for recuperation back in Portugal. You've got Hatate, and you know, it's been much covered that the league season moving into his move to Celtic means that they played a lot of football without any real break. And then you look at Rogic, and again, the international travel, etc. Since he's came back, has he hit top form since then? Is he used to playing this amount of football? Because he, you know, largely when you look through his season by season stats, just appearances, he's playing more football now than ever before, Tommy Rogic. So I take all of these things into account, and I just always stick to the kind of mindset, JP, that there's no way the 4 or 5 players who have kind of gone off form are going to stay off form. Absolutely no way. Between now and the end of the season, they're going to kick on, and then, and this is something that we'll talk about as well, we're going to be supplemented by the likes of Turnbull coming back, Kyogo coming back. And so I'm looking at last night not as a turning point, because actually it's part of an unbeaten league run that has put us on the top of the table. But I am looking upon it and thinking, well, you know what, it is going to get better between now and the end of the season. We are going to see performances from players like Beaton and Forrest, and guys that are really going to step up to the plate. But you're talking about kind of perceptions there. So we'll start off at the centre halves. People, football fans, myself included, you've got this bias going into a game unconsciously. You do have it, right? And there's certain players you like, and there's certain players you don't like. I'll give you an example. On Twitter just the other now, someone tagged in ACSOM with some screenshots with some Rangers fans talking about last night's result. But because they've tagged in ACSOM, one person in particular thinks that this tweet is having a go at us. Therefore, they've piled in with, what would you expect from ACSOM, blah, 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 negativity. It was nothing to do with that. So it's the perception that we're negative. So without watching last night's show, you're going to pile in and say we're negative when last night's show wasn't negative at all. So that, and the actual screenshots were about a Rangers discussion, nothing to do with Celtic. But it's just, if you've got that perception in your mind, ACSOM's negative, then you're going to dive in, or that player's no good, then you're watching it through a completely different prism. I don't think Starfelt put a foot wrong last night.
No,
but you know, there may be this perception that he's a dud or he's not strong enough. I watched his game, you know, with real interest. I still think that he obviously prefers the ball on his right foot. He doesn't look comfortable swinging his whole body around to get a wee bit of give on his left. But I thought he was solid last night. And I think that the partnership, him and Carter Vickers, you were going on about how difficult it can be to get an effective left-sided midfield player. In order to get an effective partnership at the back, that is very, very difficult. And I'm looking at that scenario right now, thinking to myself, they're going to start, if fit, they're going to start every one of the next 9 games in the league campaign. There is no way Welsh, who I rate highly, and Julien, who I rated highly, but we've yet to see whether he's going to return to his form. There's no way they're going to breach that partnership. And I think that's been huge. And if we do have the successful season that we're hoping that we're going to have here and we're going to win the league, I think one of the most pivotal parts of that success will be the partnership of these two guys. And you called them much maligned. I think Starfelt has been one of the most criticised players in the squad over the piece.
Probably in recent years as well, not just this season. Like there's been, I can't remember a player that has polarised opinion amongst support. You know, like I continually speak to one person in particular who has absolutely no time for him. And you know, when I said this morning to said person about how well he played last night, her reply was, "And who was he playing against?" Right, and I'm like, well,
is this person watching the broadcast here, JP?
yeah. And who is he playing against? And I was like, right, well, where do we play 90% of our football? You know what I mean? Like, we're not signing these guys to play against Real Madrid and Barcelona. I mean, I wish we were, but the reality is we're out of Europe now. The most important thing to us is to win this league, and you want the guys on the pitch playing week in, week out against Scottish teams to be able to do the business. You don't want other teams sort of having a go and go, "Oh, Celtic's defence is rubbish." You know, you want people to be like, "Well, Celtic's defence is good and it's the best in the league," and you know, and have not suggesting that there's a fear factor about our defenders, but you want players to come up against their defence and go, "Well, it's unlikely we're going to score today because we'll look at the stats, look at the odds." There's not been many goals scored into Celtic this season, and Starfelt and Carter Vickers are the reason for that, because they've played the majority of the games, and it doesn't really matter who they've played against in Europe, and if they've come up short in Europe, then fine. You know, that might be a different argument, but in terms of our bread and butter and for the league, we've had a consistent centre half pairing all season, and it's served us well. And you know, last season, you only need to compare. I know last season's an outlier and an anomaly and everything else in so many ways. But you only need to compare the defence that we have this season to last season, where it was absolute, you know, Keystone Cops, different partnerships every week, disrupting the goalkeeper, who had a different partnership in front of him every week. Sometimes, obviously, the goalkeeper changed as well. You know, that, you know, okay, there maybe be a few moments in games where there's a bit of a heart and mouth, but it's not come to much, has it? It's not really. Everyone seems to be on this, "Oh, he's going to cost us at some point, he's going to cost us at some point." And like, well, if you have that attitude going into games, then, you know, you're going to give yourself a heart attack. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, you might as well just sort of appreciate what's happening in front of you in that particular game. There's only 9 games left. So, and last night, the two of them combined to score the crucial opening goal in that game, which was the one goal. You know, McGregor's goal was the icing on the cake in terms of it just allowed us to breathe a bit easier going into the final 10-15 minutes. But that goal from that corner was the goal that we needed, and it was you know, created by our centre halves. You know what? How much Starfelt knew about it when it came up, when it came off him. I know. By the way, I didn't celebrate that goal really at the time, because I was sure there was going to be. My head was in kind of VAR world, even though we don't have it. But I was just looking at everything, going, "There's been an infringement there. Somebody's handballed it, or there's been a foul." I think quite a few people hesitated as well, because it seemed too good to be true that we would score from a corner and it would be from a knockdown. But you know, great finish from Carter Vickers, and thank God it stood.
You know, when I look at that goal, JP, and I look at the partnership that we're talking about, you're right. Last season, one of the biggest issues has been the defensive trio of the goalkeeper, 2 centre halves, and the fact that we couldn't get a consistent selection of those 3 players, and we do now. And I think it's been absolutely massive. Starfelt's coming for some criticism. I'll tell you what, I wasn't convinced early doors when I was looking at him. But again, you learn to say, right, what were the circumstances? He was thrown into that game against Tynecastle having barely met his teammates, never mind training with them. You know, he was in isolation prior to going into that game. Thrown in, different style of play, brand new team. It's going to take time for him to settle in. Ange Postecoglou and Celtic should never have been in that situation. But that was the situation that they were left in. It was shambolic at the beginning of this season, JP, and we were throwing guys in, and it was a sink or swim scenario. And I think that over time, there was that moment where he was skint in the League Cup final when people were saying, "You Bambi on ice" and all the rest of it. It's moments. I just think, generally speaking, he has turned into a fairly solid, dependable centre half. But what I like more than that is the actual relationship he's got with Carter Vickers. You were saying about actually celebrating that goal last night. What about Carter Vickers? You don't often see much. He seems so laid back. You don't see much in the way of emotion from him. But when he scored that goal, you certainly did. Because it's that primal scream moment where you just erupt. He knew how important it was. But the reason I'm talking about, and I'm labouring it a wee bit actually, about Carter Vickers, etc. I was just looking, very rough stats. I know that the data guys are absolutely on it. They can tell you everything you need to know. But I was just looking at some of the baseline stats of this team that started last night, JP, right? And I think it's very interesting that only 2 of our starters last night have played 50 or more games for Celtic. You know, Greg Taylor has played 72 games going into last night's game. Callum McGregor had played 365 games. This team, right, they might have had experience elsewhere, like Joe Hart, etc. But as a team, as a collection of players playing together, they are hugely inexperienced. They've been thrown together this season. Only 2 players had played more than 50 games. You've got guys like O'Reilly who's played less than 10. Hatate had only played 10 games last night. Maeda had only played 10 games. So we've got to take things like that into account. It's a very new team, and I think that also, I'm going to bring this into Angie's post-match comments last night again, because I think that, but I think there's a protective element at the moment. I think Ange Postecoglou, I was on the fence after the Hibs game about his comments. I wasn't sure, is he playing mind games? Was he happy with the performance? I don't think he was happy with the performance. I think he is protecting his players to the absolute hilt, JP, because albeit Rogic said, "Oh, you know, we've been on the top of the pile for 10 years. We know how to deal with this." And we all love that. We all cheer when we hear him saying it. Actually, when you look at it, that team that started last night haven't been.
Yeah,
they absolutely haven't been, right? And I think Ange Postecoglou is protecting his team to the absolute death. And no matter what questions are getting thrown to him, he's standing up for his team. I didn't think that after the Hibs game. I wasn't sure, but after last night's comments, I'm thinking, no, you're not going to criticise this team, because Ange is going to defend them to the hilt.
Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of knows where Kenny McIntyre's allegiances lie. Is you don't really need to sort of do any homework on that. I mean, Graham Spears made a joke about it about a week ago or something. I think after a bad result or a draw, one of Rangers' draws or whatever, Graham Spears said something along the lines of, "Can someone check in on Kenny McIntyre, make sure he's all right?" And you know, when you've got blatant, you know, media friends sort of got comment on that, and then he's the guy doing the post-match interview last night, and then he leads into his first question with something like, "Oh, that was a hard watch," you know. He's happy to get the 3 points. It's really, really disrespectful. I don't know what he expected Ange Postecoglou to come back with there, other than the, well, I don't know, you know, maybe it didn't go the way you wanted it to go. And, you know, I thought that was a brilliant reply, and it's obviously been, you know, replayed on many people's sites today, on Celtic blogs and sites and things like that today. And, you know, it obviously further strengthens people's, you know, love for the manager and the way that he deals with the press. And I just thought, yeah, really disrespectful. We won the game. Yeah, we didn't win it 6-0 like we did earlier on in the season, but go back to the last time we played them, we drew 0-0. And St Mirren went into that game last night, you know, having not a bad, I can't remember, somebody said the stats since January, since winter break, they actually have had quite a decent run. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I read that saying that their results had been reasonable and I know they got beat off Hearts at the weekend, so that was maybe the end of it. But and Colin mentioned that Connor, I can't remember his surname. Colin said something about their he obviously knows more about St Mirren than I do, but one of their creative players, or their main creative player, was missing last night through suspension. So I forget his name. It's completely gone out of my head. But so they maybe lacked that bit of creativity in the middle of the park. But the way they set up, it was a defensive. Stephen Robinson said afterwards it was a defensive, formation to try and counter us. And then he kind of contradicted himself, Stephen Robinson, in saying that. I've never seen us play well. So I've never had a team of mine play so well out of possession at Celtic Park. And then he praised them, and then he came back and went, "Did we deserve enough to get a point or something from the game? Probably not." And you're like, "Right, okay." So you didn't play that well then.
I always think back to the Motherwell teams that he kind of built, or the Motherwell team that he built, JP. Well, I say teams actually because I think every summer he was forced to sell a few players. I think he'd done a really good job at Motherwell, to be fair. But the one thing I didn't like about his teams was there was quite a few hammer throwers in there. I'm just going to say it. And I think when he's going to be pretty well suited to that St Mirren team because they've got a few as well. I think Main, Power, Dunn, he's on the list as well now. And Gogic, they're all likely to injure a player, eh?
I made that comment to Mark that's in front of me last night. I said it's like a kind of SPFL Globetrotters, with tongue firmly in cheek. You've got Curtis Main and Jordan Jones up top, and then you've got Gogic and Power in midfield. It's like someone's just sort of, created this sort of
hammer throwers. Aye, all the hammer throwers.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say necessarily hammer thrower. I mean, Jordan Jones obviously didn't cover himself in glory with that tackle where he got sent off against.
He injured himself as well, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, the guy's a clown, But, and then Curtis Main. Curtis Main was at Aberdeen, wasn't he? Or was it at Motherwell and then Aberdeen? I can't really remember who.
That was his movement. Motherwell, Aberdeen.
Gogic's always been I'd say he's probably falls more into the hammer thrower category, and Power 100%. I mean, he's always been that kind of guy that sort of just goes into tackles with no with no concern for the opponent. It's just about making himself look big, and if he gets the ball, fine. If he doesn't, then there's collateral damage.
Yeah, and that's why I think Maloney's comments on Starfelt at the weekend were a bit harsh, because Starfelt's not that type of player.
This Starfelt thing, I mean, my friend Matty Fairney, who I used to work with at HSBC Bank, other banks are available, he is part of the Long Bangers Hibs podcast, which is picked up some steam as a Hibs podcast, and it's great to see Matty involved, and I've listened to it a couple of times. But they were tweeting the other day. Obviously, Nisbet's injury is put him out for the season, and that's unfortunate. I mean, you don't like to see anybody getting injured and missing games like that. He seems like a decent player by all accounts. Potentially a Celtic fan as well. I heard that from a reliable source who's just texted me. Actually, I don't know if he's listening. But they were like, would this have happened if Starfelt had already been in a yellow card, as he should? And I'm like, wait a minute, it was the 23rd minute. I don't recall Starfelt having had any yellow card offences in the lead up to that. Maybe a foul or two, but I mean, if you're going to start flashing yellow cards that early in the game, then you better start flashing them everywhere. The only two people that were booked in the first half on Sunday was Starfelt and Rogic right in the stroke of half time. No Hibs players were booked. The Hibs players all came later on in the game, probably when they were getting a bit leggy and we were pressing for a goal. Mm-hmm. And I was like, was the Starfelt tackle that bad? I watched it back. I'm like, it's not that bad. It's really, I mean, yes, it's clumsy, but I don't think Nisbet's
it wasn't malicious.
No, I don't think Nisbet's injury comes about because of Starfelt's aggression or anything like that. I just think it's a bit of an unfortunate, I mean, it's kind of the same as Callum McGregor's face, it's, there was some people go out with the pitchforks for the Alloa player for the Callum McGregor thing, and I'm like, no, calm down, it was an accident, that's it. And I've watched the Starfelt tackle now about 3 or 4 times. Obviously, you see it slowed down as well, and I don't think Nisbet's sitting at home cursing Carol Starfelt for that tackle and being like, "Oh, that so and so has put me out for the season," and like that. I mean, I really don't think that's the narrative. Whereas, you know, the Long Bangers podcast was sort of implying that it was, you know, Celtic are, you know, they get the decisions and we don't, or we get decisions and they don't, or whatever. And I just thought, nah, not having that.
It's interesting to see how other people see Celtic, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, and that's kind of it's good to listen to that and to follow their sort of their output, you know, because you see a lot of things through Celtic specs on Twitter if you're just following Celtic accounts. So it is interesting to see. I've seen a few things Dundee United side of things as well through a guy that I follow. Who interviewed me during lockdown for a project, and I see his sort of take on things as well, a lot of which I don't agree with, and I try to refrain from jumping in because you know what Twitter's like. It can end up being a bit of a spicy place if you suddenly crash land into someone's timeline that you've never met, you don't know. I mean, I've had it to me, and it really kind of annoys me when someone just out of nowhere just jumps on, you know, maybe something I've said or something like that. And you're like, whoa, okay. But,
well, JP, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never had that. I've never had that kind of attention. Wow, the traction, hot takes, love it. Where does it leave us then? We're happy with Carter Vickers and Starfelt. Let us know what you think if you're watching the show, and you can comment on the platforms that you're viewing it on. Where does it leave us with Julien? You know, there's a big discussion point here with Chris Julien. He's come back from that horrific injury. I mean, was it you and I that was actually doing that game, that Dundee United game that day? It was, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
And then you can hear the clunk. You can hear it. He's come back later than expected. I've suggested that the reason Carter Vickers is on loan is because I don't think we expected to buy or bring in a centre-half. I thought that, you know, the temporary basis of Carter Vickers' deal was because we expected Julien to come back a lot quicker than he did, JP, so it was almost like a stopgap. What's actually happened is he's become our best centre-half, by some distance, I would suggest as well. He's very influential. But where does it leave Julien? Because it doesn't seem to be going the way that we planned. I mean, when you look at that bench last night, the only guy we could come on, who we could bring on rather as centre-half was Beaton. We didn't have Welsh or Julien on that bench.
Yeah, interesting that Welsh wasn't there. Welsh kind of been used a bit sparingly, thrown into the lion's den. The lion's den of Bodo Glimt away. By the way, on that, I'm really glad I didn't. You can remember last week I was talking about how Michael was trying to persuade me to go. So glad I didn't, and not because of the performance. You know, we could get Horst 6-7, whatever. That's not why I'm glad I didn't go. I'm glad I didn't go purely because of the travel chaos that he was involved with in getting there. I saw him post a picture of they'd landed in Trondheim, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no, that means that there's bad weather or whatever. And then I heard all sorts of failed takeoffs and things like that. I was, you know, the idea of that, you know, just in amongst, you know, Celtic fans who are all singing and don't really care about it, and I'm sitting there petrified about flying. Just so glad I didn't, you know, put myself into that world. I would have loved to have gone, you know, for the experience, but I'm very much B.A. Baracus when it comes to flying. And if you present me with any sort of turbulence or something that deviates from plane getting from A to B, I'm a mess. So yeah, I'm glad I missed that. But yeah, Welsh posted missing last night at the expense of Karamoko Dembele. I don't know, like who got the bench spot instead of Welsh, because he's obviously got to be going through the players and going, right, well, you've got a spot. He mentioned that he wanted to bring Dembele in a pre-match thing, so we kind of had an idea that he would maybe be there or thereabouts. Obviously felt comfortable enough to play, to just have Beaton there to come in. Julien's a weird one. There's all sorts of chat that he had to have his knee rebuilt. I don't know if you've heard that. like just on the grapevine. I don't know what that equals in terms of his ability to recover and ability to play again at an intense level. I know he's obviously come on and made that one appearance so far, but I mean, it's weird. Today is the anniversary. If you know your history, 4 years ago today, Marvin Abel Compere made his debut and his one and only appearance for Celtic in the 3-0 victory over Greenock Morton.
60 minutes did he last?
£1 million. £1 million. Absolutely mental signing. I mean, I think you said something about one time you were mixing it with the Hoi Polloi of Celtic, and you saw people going up to get ironic selfies.
Yeah,
and that's what it ended up being at Celtic for Marvin Compere, and it's just like, no one wants to be that, you know. Like no one.
He was loving it. By the way, you used a term there, Hoi Polloi. We're of a similar vintage. Can you remember the clothing label Hoi Polloi? Remember that?
Hoi Polloi. It was a high street fashion outlet, similar to, I don't know, like a Top Man or whatever, isn't it? I mean, I can't even remember if it was male and female or if it was just female, but yeah, I remember it.
Very 80s Hoi Polloi. I love that. But just for anybody listening in, I don't normally rub shoulders with the Hoi Polloi. I couldn't get a ticket. It was a cup final. Motherwell.
Aye, League Cup.
The second treble. Aye, the second treble. And that's right, the 2-0 game. Now, who scored the goals? McGregor and Cham? I'm going to say Cham scored that day.
I didn't get it either. I was working a gig in either Nice and Sleazy's or Broadcast, and I watched it. I couldn't get a signal in the venue, so I stood outside in the street on Sauchiehall Street and watched it on my phone. True story. And it was really, really hard to miss that, because I'd been at, I think, every single one up to that point, and then that was the first one of the trebles that I missed, and so I don't think if I'd have been there I would have been getting a selfie with Marvin Compere. We'll put it that way.
Well, Kevin Graham was dying to do it, and I was with Kev. I was with Kev that day. I think he was wearing an Ange jersey before Ange arrived. He was wearing a black round neck that day, and Compere was getting the ironic selfies.
Was it smart casual? Was that the dress requirements?
He had a tie underneath it, Kev. You know,
oh.
He did have a tie underneath it. Not sure the manufacturer of the jersey if it was Hoi Polloi or not. Kevin's the same vintage as us. But yeah, Compere was all over it. He was loving it, and I'm looking at him going, "Mate, you're £1 million. This is disgraceful." Another one of those Brendan Rodgers things that we'll never fully understand.
Yeah, I hope that Julien has something to contribute between now and the end of the season, but it just doesn't look good, does it? You don't get that good feeling. I mean, I said this before on the Bulletin, that I'd heard chat before Julien came back. There was so many people speaking with authority, sort of saying, "Oh, he'll never kick a ball for us again." There's one of the guys on the E-Tims podcast was saying, I think it was Ralph maybe on E-Tims, was sort of saying, "Oh, he'll never kick a ball for us again." But he was saying it and adding in little bits as if to say, I kind of know this. Obviously, he's wrong because he's come back and he's kicked the ball. But, I mean, that's all he's done so far. He's maybe kicked a couple of balls. 9 games to go. How much football is Julien going to play, and how much football is Aaron Ramsey going to play in those 9 games as well? Because you're looking at both guys who've got a long layoff, an injury, and then it's not easy to get up to speed. You know, Julien probably felt really anxious. I don't know, I'm guessing, but to come back in and play top level football after that length of time out, when you're not sure about your own, body and everything else, it's psychologically as much as anything else. It's going to take a while to get back into
massive
the
massive barrier. And this is the thing. Every one of these games, I'm totally aware I haven't brought any comments in just yet. I'm going to bring in some comments. Every game, we've heard that all the cliches in the world, JP, must win, 9 cup finals, all that stuff, but it's all true. There's going to be no risk taken. I think he's going to be very, very safe in terms of the players that he picks for every single game. There's going to be no risks, I don't believe. The defence, I think the defence that started last night will start most games. I'm, big fan of Tony Ralston and all that, but Juranovic is a far better right back than him. And I think Juranovic at 2.7, we talk about steals of the season, that's an incredible deal for Juranovic, JP. Another performance last night. It doesn't matter where he gets the ball. He's comfortable on it. I think there's an urgency about Juranovic as well. If something's not happened, he's the type of guy who tries to take the game by the grip of the neck, by the scruff of the neck. Could have scored. I mean, it was a cracking shot, but it was rising too quickly because it would have burst the net. The goalie wasn't going to stop it. And what an acquisition he's been. And, you've mentioned a couple of the other players. I hope that Julien gets some game time, but he'll not be thrown in. He'll not be thrown in for a game. He'll not start a game unless it's absolutely necessary. And I actually think in the pecking order he's below Stephen Welsh as we sit here as well. You've mentioned Jota, and you gave us that big dilemma that hopefully we don't have to face. Would you sign him or Carter Vickers? I was watching him last night. Of course, he I don't know if he gets the assist or Starfelt gets the assist, but he certainly crossed the ball in for the opener, that all-important opener. And he's certainly not hiding. JP wants the ball. He's getting into the space, and a lot of the things just aren't coming off for him. But one thing that frustrated me a wee bit last night was sometimes you're looking at him going, just do the simple thing here, mate. Do not lose possession. Don't try and backheel it. Don't try and flick it.
Oh, the backheel in the second half? I think it was. Oh, just absolutely no need for that at all. You don't want to see players doing that. I think it was still 0-0 at that point. And you're just like, I get that you've got all that in your locker, but do the simple thing. The crowd last night were getting really uptight as well, and sort of, willing players to take shots on, and there was times when Jota took shots on and it wasn't the right option. It's so difficult coming up against such a loaded, St Mirren half, but there was times when Jota was trying to, you're expecting, or the crowd will him to shoot, and then he'll shoot, and they're like, that shot's not on. That you need to be Del Piero to score from there and bend it round 3 players into the top corner. It's not happening. I just think we had to be patient last day. It was one of those games where patience was key, and it paid off for us. But by no means do I think Jota is I'm not saying sign Carter Vickers and I don't want to sign Jota. I do want to sign Jota as well because I've seen what the guy can do. But I'm just saying if it was a hard, cold ultimatum, it would be Carter Vickers for me.
I'm looking at we've said this before about ambition and what was the European ambition. We spoke about it leading up to the games last week and that as well, JP. But I'm looking at the pre-season thinking to myself, you make those 2 guys permanent and it's going to cost you 13 million quid plus wages, there or thereabouts, that kind of ballpark. And then you ask yourself, how much more would the Celtic board shell out to try and make a fist of the Champions League, to actually make progress in the Champions League? How much will they? Because would they go to 20? Would they go to 25? After the rebuild this season? And I'm thinking what they might do is probably go for these 2 guys and then look at the loan market again. Last night's starting lineup, 3 loanees. I know Maeda has, I believe, an obligation to buy after his deal ends, his loan deal, but 3 loanees, and I think that the loanees have worked well for us. Jota, Carter Vickers we've spoken about, but I want to bring up Maeda because he really was our only option. I mean, Ajeti was on the bench last night. We've not seen him since December. He was our only option. And when we look ahead to the Livy game, we'll ask whether or not Giakoumakis is going to come back, and is that the type of game on the type of pitch that will be suited to him, etc. But I was watching his game last night with interest, with the caveat that he is the only striker that we had really ready to start the game last night. And I'm looking at the fact that he had I don't even know if they were decent chances, but he got on the end of at least 3 crosses in the first half, and he managed to header them goalwards, over and wide. But there was a moment in that second half, JP, that had it come off, the dink by McGregor, and on the turn, great technique, and it would have been a phenomenal goal. Is it just something like that Maeda needs? Do you think there's a confidence thing? Are we going to go back to the point we made about Hatate and say he's played a lot of football as well as international travel? I'm not giving him a hard time. I think that he's chipped in with 4 goals so far. He's made 11 appearances, not all starting. And he is the the first choice striker as a result of injuries at this moment in time. What's your thoughts so far on Maeda with a look at the fact that we've got 9 games to go? 2 goals last night were scored by a defender and a midfielder. We didn't have many goals on the park last night. I made that point as well from the starting point. Very few of those players, JP, had scored 10 or more goals for Celtic. There was only Jota who scored 10, Abada 14 and McGregor 55. So, we don't have a lot of goals at the moment. Is Maeda the guy that's going to get us them? Is it going to click?
I've seen a lot of people making up their mind about him, and I mentioned last week about the guy, a Holland guy next to me who was using language that is nowhere near Celtic Park, or should be nowhere near Celtic Park, but he had them written off as a fraud, a quote-unquote fraud. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm million miles away from that. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think he's going to be the answer, long term or whatever. I mean, I know that we've got the option to, not the option to buy that we have to buy him in the summer. Ange Postecoglou rates him. I would, make a judgment after a full season of with a pre-season at Celtic and then a full season, after that, because so many people are so quick to make snap judgments on people and write them off. I think it's because we've been burned so many times with so many poor signings in recent years that, if you don't do it in the sort of first 5-10 games, it's almost like, well, yeah, he's not good enough. And you're just like, whoa, give the guy a break. He's trying, he's running about, he's pressing, he has scored goals, on another day that goal goes in and he all of a sudden becomes a poster boy, and the signs start appearing at the side of the pitch. Maeda, can I get your top, and all of that kind of stuff. That's a goal like that can completely change the mindset of a child, and then also an adult. A man child, and then suddenly this guy, that goal he scored against St Mirren, yeah. And you're like, well, yeah, he's been playing well up until that point. It's just he happened to get a goal in that game, and it was a good looking goal. Always like those shots over the shoulder, reminds me of David Platt's goal.
Oh, Belgium, exactly.
One of my favourite goals of all time. Absolute belter of a goal. Doesn't matter it's England, doesn't matter it's David Platt. I didn't particularly dislike David Platt. I kind of liked him because he went to Italy and played for Sampdoria, and it was one of those, the Gazzetta Football Italia players. But that goal over the shoulder, if you've not seen it, just look up YouTube, David Platt, Belgium. I've watched it hundreds of times. I just remember being completely in awe of someone that could do that. That hit that sort of shot. I'm obviously very much displaying my age here by saying that.
He came on as a sub. that night.
Yeah, well, I can't even remember what tournament it was in. Was it a
World Cup 1990?
Oh, was it in the
finals? Yeah, right. Definitely, aye.
Right, that's my first memory of the World Cup then. That 1990 was my first, I can remember the World Cup from that point on. Prior to that, 86, I think I might have had the sticker album, but probably put the stickers in upside down or whatever. I wasn't, all in at that point. My obsession with football sort of started in 87, 88, and then by the time 90 came around, I was like playing the Italia 90 computer game on my Amstrad, and buying Match and Shoot and all that all the time, and just completely immersed in that world. And
it's a bygone age, by the way. I mean, also another big tournament for me, going back to that era. Sorry for the nostalgia trip, ladies and gents.
At least we're talking about football and not music.
Euro 88. Loved that tournament. The Van Basten Hullet Netherlands side, the Republic Island team, and I loved that tournament. I know Scotland weren't in it. It was quite a small tournament when you look at the amount of teams that were in it, but the Republic Island team totally fell in love with Jack Charlton's team, and Rinat Dzayev was the goalkeeper for the USSR. He was regarded as one of the best goalies in the world at that time. But it was the Netherlands team, Koeman and Hullet and Van Basten.
The Holland strip at that time, was that the one that had the kind of white fleck through it? It had the really nice collar. I can't remember who made it. Probably
Adidas, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The strips at that time were absolutely cracking. But but Maeda, back to Maeda after his shot. I don't know what will happen on Sunday, whether Giakoumakis will be not ill anymore and whether or not he'll come back in. I did feel last night that we missed Giakoumakis a bit. Up front. You're going to miss a guy that scored a hat-trick in a game to win you that game against. We missed him against Hibs, definitely. He would have given Porteous and Shiri a harder time than they got in that game, because that game kind of, as Mark, the guy in front of me last night, said, it was one of those classic sort of midday kickoffs where it was lacking that. You transfer that game and make it a Wednesday night. It's a different game, I think. It's weird how, like, a midday kickoff... that's why I'm a wee bit concerned about this game coming up on Sunday. It's the fact that it's a midday kickoff in a... No disrespect to Livingston, but it's not a very inspiring stadium. See the highlights. You see the highlights of the game last night, and there's like an entire stand empty. I know it'll be full on Sunday, and there'll be 3/4 of it Celtic fans.
Did they still have the Motorola seats? Did they still have the sponsor on the seats from about 20 years ago?
No, it's something. It's called like No Ruddin or something, or not. It begins with NO, but you can see the whole sponsor was visible in the seats because the stand was closed. But Livingston got a win last night against Dundee United. Mm-hmm. And Dundee United are not a bad side, as they proved, or as they have proved in recent weeks. Again, guy that I know, Campbell, this Dundee United fan, he's up and down on courts every week. 1 minute he's a masterclass, and then the next minute he's like, nah. So they're a wee bit all over the place, but I didn't expect them to get beat last night off Livingston. I thought they might have got a point, but Livingston are playing well. They beat Dundee 4-0 at the weekend. Forrest is playing
good bit
well.
Of form. Yeah, good bit of form. And by the way, whoever runs a TikTok page is having a cracking time with it as well. Yeah?
That's pretty good, that's pretty good.
That is just vintage Scottish football. I'm not going to call it the cinch. That does my head in when people refer to the entire Scottish football as the cinch. Scottish Premiership table, though, when you look at it, Livingston, as you were saying, they're one of the form sides at the moment over the last 5 games. But when you look at 4th in the league, JP, on 37 points, and 10th, Aberdeen, 32 points, only 5 points separating 4th and 10th. You've got Hearts sitting in 3rd, kind of like on a wee island by themselves, 49 points, and then of course Celtic and Rangers on 70 and 67 respectively. And the bottom 2, St Johnstone and Dundee, are in a dogfight to see who finishes bottom. But Livy are on good form. It's a stadium that hasn't been a happy hunting ground for us. There may be some players playing there for the first time. Maeda's never played at, I keep calling it Almondvale. Maeda's never played at Livy, and there are others. O'Reilly hasn't played at Livingston. Hatate won't have played there either. So it's an unfamiliar setting for some of our players. You take all these things into consideration. We have to get that monkey off our back, though. We need to go to Livingston. We need to win. And Magnet 67 comes in to say just that. Afternoon all, I'm going to stick my neck out and declare, if we beat Livy on Sunday, we will win the title. It's one of these things we're going to have to get over all of these mental barriers, JP, between now and the end of the season if we want to win the league. Let's go out there and win. How likely do you see that happen? Or is it going to be another stuffy affair like the game against Hibs on Sunday?
I was at the last Livingston defeat, and walking out the ground that day, if you think about, we had no idea what was coming in the subsequent months, and we didn't know at that point where we would get to. I wasn't at the stage where I was thinking this guy's a dud, or he's a fraud, or anything like that. Talking about Postecoglou, but you left. I left that day, and I think I said to you before, it took me about 5 hours to get home, and so it was 5 hours with no headphones to really ponder. My headphones had ran out of battery, so I had 5 hours to just sort of ponder that result and just kind of go, wow, we're maybe in a bit of a bad place here. And at that stage, that was maybe the sort of real big red flag that this was going to be a really tough season ahead. Where we're losing a game away to Livingston again. they're pretty much their one and only shot. And you're thinking, how are we going there with the team that we've got? Even though we were missing players that day, I know we were, but you were like, how are we going there and not getting at least a draw? We should be going there and beating them. What is so special about that ground? I actually found, I've been going through some old VHS tapes that I found at my mum's, and I found, this is amazing, I found footage of me on the telly in 2006, and it was the day that we beat Livingston at Amon Vale 2-0. Zurawski and Maloney scored. Don't know if you remember that, 2006. But me and my friend Ross Mackay and his now wife Pamela decided to go through and we applied to get onto the Scott Sport programme. And I don't know if you remember the Scott Sport for, I think maybe a season, did a thing where they had like a live audience, and they used to split between Jim Delahunt in the studio, and then they would go over to this guy Julien, who was Cameron from Big Brother's brother, as he had this really strong island accent, and then there was a girl present as well who just smiled all the time, and her name was Sarah O. She was Irish, blonde hair. Does this ring any bells?
I have never ever seen this.
You've never? Well,
I cannot remember this concept.
They would cut between, and so when it came on the video, I was like, oh my god, this is the one I'm on. Oh my god! And then I could see me in the background sitting at, like, there was little tables, because they're standing at the front, the camera on them, and then behind them is just like tables, and then they would go down and sit at the table with the three people at the table and ask them a question, or the people would ask a question. And I completely forgot that I asked the question. So the mic goes to me, and it's just like, and he's like, John Paul, you've got a question for the panel. And then he goes like that, and I'm like, yeah. I said, Jim Jeffries has been touted as manager of the year for his achievements with Hearts so far this season. I can't even remember what Hearts were doing at that point. I said, Gordon Strachan in his first season has won a League Cup, and he's on course to win the league at a canter. I was like, why is he not getting it? And then they cut up to Delahunt, Andy Walker, and Bill Leckie. And Andy Walker kind of went, I agree with the guy. I think Gordon Strachan's a contender, but Jim Jeffries equally is a contender. And then it cut to Bill Leckie, and he was just like, no, Jim Jeffries for me. Yeah, I'm always a big supporter of someone punching above their weight, and Jim Jeffries is certainly doing that this season. And then Jim Delahunt was like, thanks very much, guys. And then on to
JP, that was always going to happen. You were always going to be on the screen. Listen, if you want the tapes digitised, give us a shout, because we've got the machine that can do that now as well. So I'd love to see them appearing on Twitter at some point. And then it'll be retweeted all over Planet Twitter. Now, by the way, there's a few other things I was going to mention, right? After the Hibs game, I'm screaming out for substitutions. And the sub that I thought made quite a difference was O'Reilly coming on for Rogic, who was off it, which was unfortunate. But the other night, it was almost like vice versa. It was like the flip side of that was O'Reilly comes off, Rogic plays well. Are we at a situation now where we only play one of them? And if so, who is that one against Livy?
I would be more inclined to play Rogic. If Rogic plays like he did in the last half hour of the game last night, then 100% Rogic. But I mean, we just at this moment in time, you don't really know what Rogic you're going to get. I don't have a shrine to Rogic in my flat, like Dan mentioned yesterday.
Apparently, they all have it. Everybody has a shrine to Tommy Rogic.
Yeah, I don't have a shrine to him. I mean, I like the guy, but I wouldn't go that far. Maybe you have to be Australian to have a shrine. But Sunday's such a big game. I mean, the opposition, our rivals, are looking at that and going, "Oh, that's notorious. They don't like going there. They all, that we could hopefully rely on them dropping points there. If we don't drop points there and we pick up all three, they're running out of places that we can go. That and then the onus, the light shines on them and goes, right, well, it's up to you to do it. At Ibrox or Celtic Park, and I would offer that even if we did lose at Ibrox, we'll beat them at Celtic Park. I don't think that's not. I think that's the way it can go, and if that happens and we win all the other games, we're the champions.
And we'll be following every single part of that, every step of the way. Listen, there's somebody that you've got people thinking. Celtic Boy 1993. That wasn't a vintage year for Celtic, by the way. I was at that game in 2006. Last game we won there was in the Scottish Cup, I'm sure.
It was the following year, 2007. I looked into this. That was the league. That was a league game. That might be the last time that we won there in the league that day. Because it definitely was the league. Zarafsky and Maloney. There's no way that's happening. I don't think.
I don't think so either. Acrobat comes in. We spoke about this last night because Lawrence was talking about giving a Jetty a run out in a 4-4-2. I do not think Ange is going to change. If I look at all the interviews he's done, his philosophy, the way that he sets his team up, he is not going to change it. He will not change that, if you ask me. And there was one occasion this season, just to completely contradict that, where he played 3 at the back. Was that against St Johnstone? But it came down to the fact that he was forced into it because of the personnel that he had at the time. So we shall see. Acrobat, not shouting you down there, pal. Thanks for contributing, but we shall see. And we're also looking at the Urban Coolshay, who reckons we're going to win 3-0. Paul, love that optimism. Paul McLean, a draw at Livy and at Ibrox with 7 wins, and that's the title. Seems doable to me. It's interesting, although not surprising, that Celtic fans are looking at this particular game as being a potential tricky one in the running as well, because historically it has been for a long time. So yeah, loads more to talk about as well. I wanted to bring it up because he gets a lot of stick. Jamesy Forrest comes on last night, and I think that he looked like the Jamesy of old. I've heard it all, JP, over the last few weeks. He's finished. His legs have gone. His career is over. And some of the moments, I know he's not had a good run, but some of the moments this season that I keep pointing out is League Cup semi-final against St Johnstone, the part that he played in that game against the goal against Leverkusen that Jota finally finished, one of the best goals of the season. No way I'm accepting that Jamesy Forrest has finished yet, and I think last night was a stark reminder of that.
No, absolutely. You listen to a lot of people were saying before last night's game that Celtic were finished as a team. The legs have gone, and we're looking tired and everything else. Well, we won a game of football last night 2-0, and won it in the end comfortably. So if our legs are gone, then I don't think we're able to do that. The game lasted 90 minutes, and we played to the end of the game. I didn't look around that pitch and see people blowing out the proverbials by the end of it. So I tell you what, Forrest starting on Sunday might not be the worst shout. I watched Forrest last night because he was on my side of the ground, obviously, in the North Stand. When I watched him, and what Forrest does is quite basic in that when he decides to do something, he very rarely changes his mind at the last minute. So there was a point where he beat a man and he was like, I'm going to the byline here. And he went to the byline, and people were like, why are you not crossing it beforehand? And it's like, because he's decided to go to the byline, and then the player cut out the cross. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something about James Forrest with his experience, with his sort of probably calm, measured approach. Abada's a wee bit obviously Abada's been great, scored a lot of goals, etc. But Abada's a bit of a jack in the box. You don't know what's going to happen a lot of the time. Whereas Forrest, I think if Forrest gets in a position, sometimes he's going to do the right thing at that time because he's got so much experience. And you saw it last night when Beaton, Rogic and Forrest came on. They all proved to be a catalyst in our getting the 3 points. So I think Forrest maybe starting on Sunday as a shout. Giakoumakis is obviously, I would imagine he'd probably come back and be on the bench on Sunday. I don't think he'll just throw him if he's not played for 2 weeks or whatever. I don't think he's just going to put him in and to start. He'll probably be on the bench. So it might be the lineup that was out there last night: Rogic in for O'Reilly and Forrest in for Abada.
Interesting changes. There you go. One good thing about this is if we get something wrong, we will be very quickly corrected in the comment section, JP. And I keep calling one of our viewers the Urban Coolshay, and I've been informed by Studs Lanigan Is that your real name? It's Culture. Sorry, studs, and sorry, the Urban Culture, for mispronouncing that for the last year and a half, and I'll make sure I don't do it like I did with...
Do you remember the Glasgow City of Culture, 1990? Remember Glasgow was the City of Culture. My dad got a T-shirt made that said Glasgow City of Culture, and it was spelled Kultcha, Culture, in 1990, and he wore it. He was an Englishman, obviously, but he was very much a kind of a proud adopted Scot, and he used to wear that with comical pride.
We love the culture.
Yeah, culture.
We love it, mate. Listen, here's one final point as well. Dembele's booking, absolutely shocking. You look at the possession last night, 77% in Celtic's favour, right? Yet, we were penalised on 9 occasions for a foul against 7. So we've got the ball for 77% of the game, and for the 23% of the game that we haven't got the ball, we are committing fouls, JP, right? Now, that's almost a foul every 2 minutes when we don't have possession. That's nonsense. That's just a nonsense, right? And then you look at the yellow cards. 2 plays 2. So we've got 77% possession. When we don't have the ball, we're kicking their players. And, you know, we've actually got the same amount of bookings as St Mirren last night, when we've been talking about all the hammer throws that they deploy in such games. And it's the same virtually every week. It's virtually impossible for that to be fair. If you've only without possession for 20% of the game, you must be kicking the opposition players for the entire 20% of the game to get the same or more amount of fouls than the opposition. It's a nonsense, isn't it? I mean, Dembele's booking is a prime example.
The Dembele one was so... I mean, it's the other side. That's the other side. That's towards the main stand. So I've not seen it again. But at the time, it looked like the player just ran across him, and he kind of... It was one of those ones where it was like, yeah, it was a foul, but a yellow card? Like, I don't think so. I think there was another one where when McGregor got booked, that was a yellow card probably because he was taking the guy out who was, I think it was Jordan Jones maybe, who was going to go on a run. And I remember saying to Mark in front of me, would you have taken the yellow card for that, or would you let him go? And he was like, no, I would have definitely taken him down. By the way, I saw somebody's bet last night. They bet 80 quid. It was, you know, as people share their winnings on Twitter. It's a bit, not a strange thing to do. I don't know. I maybe have done it once. Yeah, I did share my winnings when Kieran Tierney scored when he was captain Celtic. The game against Kilmarnock. Remember he scored?
Yeah. Cracker.
I heard the price at half time of Tierney to score at the first goal of the second half. It was a good odds, and I just went, hey, minute, I'm going to go and... Well, I very, very rarely put any bets on in the ground, but I went up and put a tenner on it, and he scored that goal within a few minutes of the second half kicking off, and I was like, not only have you scored an absolute worldie, you've just earned me like definitely over 100 quid or something like that. But a guy had put money on Cameron Carter-Vickers to score any time in the game and Callum McGregor to be booked. And he put 80 quid on that, right? And he won nearly $4,000. I mean, so I bet you he was absolutely delighted when McGregor made that decision to bring down Jordan Jones as he was about to motor up the park. Not that I think he would have done much, but I guess you take your chances. But the Dembele booking nonsense, to book that wee guy like, after being on the park for less than 5 minutes or something like that.
I know.
Not even a like, you know, okay, I have a word, you know, just a straight away a booking, you know.
He actually couldn't get his body out of the way. When you watch it back, he could not, because of the momentum of his run and the speed in which St Mirren's player actually diverted his direction, right? It was impossible for Dembele, no matter what player was in that position, they could not get their body out of the way. It was not an attempt to bring the player down. He impeded him accidentally. It was never a booking. But again, I can't go through a broadcast without moaning about the referees. So there you go. We didn't even speak about. We've not even spoke about music, JP.
Was it Ewan Anderson was the referee last night? Is that who it was?
It was. I'll just check.
he's not popular in my section of Celtic Park.
Ewan Anderson it was, yes. Dreadful decision, Ewan, if you're tuning in. JP, it's always an absolute pleasure. Are you going to the game, by the way, on Sunday?
I'm about 50-50 at the moment. There's a few things I need to move around, and hopefully I can. I'm potentially, well, I am working, but it's about where I work, and if I can get to work somewhere else, then I might be able to go. But at this moment, as it stands right now, no, I won't be. I've got a ticket, but I'm hoping that I can negotiate, because I had a really bad feeling about Easter Road last Sunday because I didn't have a ticket and I wasn't going, and I hadn't even made plans to go to a pub. So I ended up watching it on the telly in my flat. I just was like, oh, this feels like last season. Not good. All right, Willie Doug.
Listen, we're sorry, ladies and gents, for not mentioning music, but Jim Hanaway's done it for us. Tune in to our YouTube channel, Willie Doug Unplugged. You will give it a big thumbs up. The guy's a unique talent. He is...
King Tut's on the 19th of March, supporting Nicky Lick,
there you go.
singer of Sargent, who supported Oasis back in the day. In fact, possibly on their final tour, maybe. I think that maybe.
I think it was, because Nicky ended up, full name Nick Mercer, ended up getting one of Liam's jackets, and I bet he didn't get that from Matalan, and he still got it. So yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm going to leave that up. Tune in, Willie Doug, outstanding. If you are watching on YouTube, we have just smashed through 8 million views on the YouTube channel. Get yourself subscribing, hit the notifications bell, loads of big content coming up in the months to follow. Not all Celtic, sometimes you get a bit of music like Willie Doug, outstanding, bit of variety, and a wee bit of culture as well. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.